thought I was just taking a temporary cleaning job. But the moment I stepped into that mansion and heard those twin babies crying, I knew something was terribly wrong. They weren't just hungry. They weren't just tired. They were grieving. And so was their father. He just didn't know it yet. What happened in that house would change all of us forever. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like this video if the story touches your heart, and comment below where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to the day I met them. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just a woman who once knew what it felt like to cry and have no one listen. When I answered a job posting to help in a wealthy home outside of Boston, I never expected to meet two babies who hadn't stopped crying since the day they were born, or a man who blamed them for the death of his wife and refused to even look at them. But what I uncovered in that house wasn't just neglect. It was buried grief, silence, shame. And inside a locked room, a box of letters from a dead mother that would bring a broken father back to life. This is the story of how love can still grow from unbearable loss, and how sometimes it takes a stranger to help a family find their way back to each other. I still remember the smell of the rain that morning, the kind of heavy, cold New England rain that sinks into your bones. My umbrella had flipped inside out twice before I even made it up the marble steps. The house was massive, too perfect, the kind of place where you imagine laughter echoing off chandeliers and soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. But this house, it was silent, except for the crying. That sound, God, it cut straight through the walls. I hadn't even knocked yet, and already I could hear it. Two distinct voices, two babies, crying like something had shattered inside them and no one had noticed. I was soaked when the door opened. An older woman, mid-60s maybe, looked me up and down. Her name was Mrs. Ellison. She didn't say hello. Just asked, "You here for the job?" I nodded. She hesitated. "It's not what you think." Before I could respond, the crying grew louder. One high-pitched and gasping, the other more guttural, almost like a growl. "I've done childcare before," I told her. "They've run off 5 professionals in 6 weeks," she said. "It's not the babies. It's the man." That man was David Whitmore, tech CEO, widower, father of 2 9-month-old boys, and from what I'd read online, emotionally absent, cold, and richer than sin. "I'm not a nanny," I clarified. "I'm here for house support, cleaning, organizing." She looked at me like she knew I was lying. "Well, come in then," she muttered. "Let's see if you can handle the sound of grief." I stepped inside and instantly felt it, that strange weight in the air, like the house was holding its breath. Every corner was spotless, but somehow everything felt abandoned. And upstairs, the crying continued like a siren song, calling out, begging someone to come. He didn't even bother to meet me right away. I waited in the foyer for nearly 10 minutes, dripping rainwater onto the pristine tile. Finally, footsteps echoed from the marble stairs. David Whitmore looked exactly like the headlines: expensive watch, tailored shirt, a frown carved so deep into his face you could plant something in it. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched. "You're here for cleaning?" he asked, voice low. I nodded. "Rachel Morgan." "Good. The staff room's down the hall. The babies are upstairs. Don't go in there unless you're asked. I've got a call in 10. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it and turned away. I should have left right then. But I didn't. Because as he walked off, one of the babies let out a scream that shook something in me. Not just my ears, but my memory. It sounded just like my little brother when our mom died. I found my way to the kitchen, where Mrs. Ellison was boiling water for tea, like it was the only normal thing left in the world. "They never stop?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. "Liam and Noah cry most of the day," she said eventually. "But the nights are worse. It's like they're haunted." "By what?" "By the absence of their mother," she said plainly. "And by a father who hasn't touched them since the day they were born." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. But something in my chest tightened. That night, after the rest of the house went quiet, I walked past the nursery. The door was slightly open. The crying hadn't stopped. I shouldn't have gone in. But I did. The room was like something out of a catalog. Soft lighting, white cribs, plush clouds hanging from the ceiling. Beautiful, immaculate, expensive. And yet, those two babies, Liam, with a faint birthmark on his left cheek, and Noah, with his fists clenched tight, were screaming like their hearts were breaking. I didn't touch them. I just stood in the doorway and watched. They weren't looking around. They weren't thrashing. They were both staring at the same spot, a blank stretch of wall to the left of their cribs. It took me a second to realize that wall connected to another room, a locked room. Later, over a cup of decaf tea, I asked Mrs. Ellison, "What's behind that wall?" She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Her room," she whispered. "Claire's, his wife, locked since the day she died." I set my cup down carefully. "She died during childbirth, didn't she?" "Complications? Emergency C-section? She never came home." He came back from the hospital and packed every trace of her away. Moved into the far end of the house. Won't even look at a photo of her. "And the twins? They've been crying ever since." I couldn't sleep that night, not because of the crying, though that was bad enough, but because I couldn't stop thinking about that wall, about two babies staring at it like someone they loved was on the other side, and maybe, in their own way, she was. The next morning, I showed up to work an hour early. I told myself it was just to be helpful, but the truth was, I needed to hear the crying again, to be sure it wasn't something I imagined in the dark. It wasn't. At 6:12 a.m., the wails started. Piercing, synchronized, heart-wrenching. Mrs. Ellison looked exhausted as she handed me a warm bottle. "They were quiet for about 4 hours last night. That's a record." "Do they cry together every time?" I asked. She nodded. Like they're connected. One starts, the other follows. Upstairs, I could hear a door slam. David's office. He never came down for breakfast. Never came near the twins. He didn't even look at them. Around 10 a.m., I finished vacuuming the east wing. The crying hadn't stopped. My hands were shaking from the sound alone. I walked past the nursery again and peeked inside. Still crying, still staring at that wall. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise for the sake of noise. It was mourning. That's when something inside me snapped. I walked straight down the hall, right to the locked door, the one behind that wall. The air changed the closer I got. Heavier. Still. Like the room was holding its breath. "Don't." Mrs. Ellison's voice came from behind me. "He'll fire you." "I just want to see." "I haven't been in there in almost a year. No one has." "Then maybe that's the problem," I said. Mrs. Ellison hesitated, then reached into her apron and pulled out a small silver key. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered. "Then don't." "I will." She pressed the key into my hand. "Just be gentle with him. He wasn't always like this." The lock clicked louder than I expected. I pushed the door open slowly. And there she was. Not Claire, the person, but her presence. The room hadn't been touched. The curtains were still drawn, but light leaked in through the edges, casting soft beams over the room. A dressing table with neatly placed perfumes. A bookshelf filled with novels and framed photos. A closet left halfway open with soft sweaters folded in perfect stacks. And on the nightstand, a sonogram photo. She never got to see them. But she had prepared for them. There were handwritten letters, dozens of them, in a floral box near the bed. Each envelope was labeled in the same elegant cursive. To Liam, Year 1. To Noah, Year 2. My heart stopped. Claire had written to them. For years she'd never get to see. She must have known. I was still holding the box when David appeared in the doorway. "What the hell are you doing in here?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was dangerous. I turned slowly. His eyes were blazing, his hands clenched. "You had no right." "I know," I said quietly. "But your sons cry every night like their hearts are breaking, and no one's asking why." His jaw tightened. "They're babies. That's what babies do." "No, not like this. You think I haven't tried? I've had doctors, sleep experts, nannies. They all left." "Because they were treating a symptom," I said, holding up the box. "Not the cause." He stared at it like it might bite him. "What is that?" "Letters," I said. "From your wife, to your sons." His eyes flickered. "How do you know that?" "They're labeled, each one, for every year. She must have known. Something could go wrong." He looked like he couldn't breathe. "She was always scared," he said finally, "of childbirth, of leaving them behind. But I told her everything would be fine." "And when it wasn't," I whispered, "you locked it all away, including them." His face twisted. "Don't you dare." "You haven't touched them in 9 months, David. You don't feed them. You don't hold them. You don't even look at them." He said nothing. I took a deep breath. "They look toward this wall every night because they know their mother is missing. But what's killing them isn't her absence, it's yours." The silence between us was deafening. He looked at the letters like they were radioactive. "I can't," he said finally. "If I open those, it makes it real." "It is real," I said softly. "And it's not going away until you stop pretending it didn't happen." I left the box on the bed and walked out. I didn't wait for him to follow. I wasn't even sure he would. That night, the crying returned. But it was different, softer, like the boys were unsure, testing the air. I sat outside their room in the hallway listening. And then I heard something else. A door creaking open. Then footsteps, slow, hesitant, coming down the hallway. I held my breath. David appeared, holding one of the letters. He looked pale, fragile, like a man just pulled from the wreckage. "I read the first one," he said. "It was addressed to both of them." He looked into the nursery. They didn't stop crying when I walked in. But when I said their names, they did. I nodded. "They've been waiting for your voice." He hesitated. "I don't know how to be a father." "Start by being present," I said. "The rest, we can learn together." He didn't walk into the nursery like a father. He walked in like a man approaching a coffin. His hands were shaking. His lips were pale. And the look in his eyes wasn't love. It was terror. The twins had stopped crying the moment he whispered their names. Liam, Noah. It was like they recognized something ancient in the sound. Something they hadn't heard in months, but still remembered with every cell of their little bodies. David stood at the edge of the cribs, frozen. "They're so small," he said, almost in disbelief. "Yes," I whispered, standing beside him. "They're still babies, David." He looked at me, then at them again. "Which one is—" "That's Liam," I pointed. "The one with the little freckle near his temple. Noah's on the right." Noah was staring up at David, Not crying, not smiling, just watching, waiting. I picked up Liam gently and turned to him. "Do you want to try?" I asked. He flinched. I can't. You can. I'll drop him. I don't know how to hold a baby. I'll help. He looked at Liam, then at his own hands like they didn't belong to him. Slowly, I guided his arms into position. And then, for the first time since the day they were born, David Whitmore held his son. Liam didn't scream. He didn't wriggle or cry. He rested his cheek against his father's chest, his tiny hand curling into the fabric of David's shirt. David went rigid. He's warm. They both are. I thought I'd feel nothing. And, he swallowed, I feel everything. His knees buckled, and I guided him gently into the rocking chair in the corner. Liam stayed quiet, nestled into his father's heartbeat. David stared down at him like he was seeing the sun for the first time. I missed this, he whispered. You didn't miss it, I said softly. You're just late. And that's okay. Noah, still in his crib, started to fuss. Just little whimpers, not his usual scream. May I asked. David nodded. I lifted Noah and brought him over. As soon as he saw his brother nestled in his father's arms, he stretched out his little arms too. David looked at me with panic in his eyes. I can't hold both. I'll help. We shifted carefully, adjusting his grip, steadying his arms. And then, he was holding them both. One on each side, two little hearts beating against his chest. I don't deserve this, he said, tears already welling in his eyes. I wasn't there. I hated them. I blamed them. I ignored them. They never blamed you, I said. They just waited for you. Liam yawned. Noah closed his eyes, and in that quiet, sacred moment, the crying stopped. Completely. For the first time in months. There was only the sound of rain on the window and the soft breath of healing. David stayed there for almost an hour. Didn't move. Didn't speak. Just rocked slowly, the two babies curled into him like they had always belonged there. When he finally looked at me, his face had changed. Not all the lines were gone. The grief was still there. But something had softened. I don't know how to fix what I've done, he said. You don't have to fix the past. Just show up for the future. He nodded. Then, like a child, he asked, Will you help me? I smiled through the tears in my eyes. Of course. That night, the house was quiet. No shrieking, no haunting. Just two babies, sleeping soundly in their cribs. And a father, sleeping on the floor next to them, one hand on each crib, as if he was afraid to let go again. The morning light came in soft and golden. It spilled across the hallway carpet like honey, and for the first time since I'd entered that mansion, the silence felt warm. I found David in the nursery. He was asleep, slouched against the wall between the cribs, one hand resting near each baby as if afraid they might vanish without his touch. He looked peaceful, not perfect, not healed, but human. I made coffee, toast, nothing fancy. When he came downstairs, hair tousled, barefoot, holding Liam in one arm, I almost didn't recognize him. Morning, he said shyly, like a boy who'd broken something and was finally ready to admit it. Morning, I smiled. You look exhausted, he offered. No, alive. He chuckled, almost embarrassed. I feel it. Noah was still asleep upstairs. Liam had woken early, hungry and wide-eyed. David fed him without needing help this time. Not perfectly, but patiently. I was terrified, he admitted, holding them. I know. He looked down at Liam, who was chewing the edge of a blanket like it owed him money. But then, I remembered something. What? Claire. The first time we talked about having kids, she said, "They'll terrify you, but they'll make you braver than you ever imagined." She was right. He nodded slowly. "And that's the problem," he whispered. "She was right about everything, even dying." I sat across from him at the long kitchen island. The light through the window made his face look younger. "She left them letters, didn't she?" he asked. "Yes." "Did you read any?" "No, I only saw the envelopes." He was quiet for a long time. Then, in a voice so quiet it could have disappeared if I blinked, he said, "Will you read one with me?" We went back upstairs. He carried Liam. The door to Claire's room was still open from the day before, but it felt different now. The light touched everything like a blessing. David moved slowly, like a man entering a church. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding Liam, and opened the wooden box. There were dozens of letters, each in a soft pink or cream envelope. One of them read, "To my boys, your first birthday." He held it for a moment before handing it to me. "I can't," he said. So I read, "My loves, Liam and Noah. If you're hearing this letter, it means I couldn't stay. And that breaks my heart more than I can ever say. But don't you dare think for 1 second that I didn't want you. You were the greatest gift I ever received. Your tiny kicks inside me, the sound of your heartbeats, they were my symphony. If Daddy's sad, be patient with him. He's strong, but grief is heavier than it looks. He might forget how to smile for a while, but deep down, he's full of love. He just needs time to find it again. And when he does, you'll see the best man I've ever known. Take care of each other. Be kind. Be wild. Be silly. And always know your mama loved you before you even had a name, with all the love in the world. Mom." By the time I finished, Liam was asleep in David's arms, and David, he wasn't crying. He was weeping, head bowed, shoulders shaking. I didn't touch him. I didn't say anything. Sometimes the only thing you can give someone is space to collapse. When he finally looked up, his voice was hoarse. She knew. She did. She knew I'd fall apart. Yes. And she trusted you to come back. That night he moved into the guest room, the one right next to the nursery. He asked me if that was okay. I told him it was more than okay. It was necessary. At 3:14 a.m., Noah woke up fussing. Not screaming, just a sleepy protest. David beat me to the door. I watched from the hallway as he picked Noah up, held him close, and whispered the lullaby Claire used to sing. He sang the melody off-key. But Noah didn't care. Neither did I. Because in that moment, he wasn't just a man trying. He was a father, becoming. It was a Tuesday morning, cold, gray, and unremarkable, except for the fact that David Whitmore, billionaire tech mogul, CEO of Whitmore Systems, and formerly known as the Ghost Father, was ironing a button-up shirt with a baby strapped to his chest. "You're going to a boardroom, not a cookout," I teased gently from the kitchen doorway. He looked up, flustered but proud. "It's not like I do this every day." "No," I smiled, "but you're going to want to start." Noah was asleep against his chest in the carrier. Liam was babbling in his high chair, chewing on a teething ring like it owed him money. David adjusted his collar. "Is it too much? I haven't worn a tie in months." "It's not for the tie," I said. "They'll notice what really changed." He paused. "What changed?" "You." By 8:30 a.m., we were packed into the back of his black SUV. The car seats were secure. The diaper bag was full. I had snacks, bottles, spare outfits, backup pacifiers, and 2 rattles. David? He had nerves. He glanced in the rearview mirror every 5 seconds. Are they okay? They're fine, I said. You blinked at Noah wrong, and he giggled. David let out a breath. I've walked into shareholder meetings with 50 million on the line and felt calmer than this. Because none of those meetings held your heart in a car seat. The Whitmore Systems headquarters stood like a glass monolith in the heart of Boston. Sleek, expensive, intimidating. David stepped out of the car with 1 baby in each arm. He wore a navy blazer, dark jeans, and a look of quiet resolve. The receptionist almost dropped her tablet when she saw him. Mr. Whitmore? She blinked. Are those... These are my sons, he said. Liam and Noah. I stood beside him, holding the diaper bag and trying to pretend this wasn't one of the most surreal moments of my life. People started to whisper. Phones came out. Employees who hadn't seen David smile in over a year were now watching him rock 1 baby gently while whispering, "You're doing great, buddy," as the elevator doors opened. The 22nd floor was executive territory. Glass walls, leather chairs, men and women in tailored suits with caffeine addictions, and calendars booked to 2030. The moment the elevator opened, you could hear a pin drop. Then Sandra, David's longtime assistant, gasped. Mr. Whitmore. She put a hand to her mouth. Are those... Yes, he said with a soft smile. They're mine. She walked toward him slowly, eyes wide with wonder. They look just like Claire, she whispered. He nodded, especially when they sleep. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. She would be so proud of you. David led the way to his office, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that made even the skyline feel small. He placed Liam on the couch and sat Noah on his lap. And then, without hesitation, he turned his monitor away, closed his laptop, and said the words that stopped time. Clear my schedule, for the day. I'm spending it with my sons. You could hear the collective gasp across 3 departments. Sandra stammered. Sir, there's a call with Zurich, the quarterly review. It can wait, he said. They waited 9 months for me. Zurich can wait 1 more day. I watched from the side of the room, holding back tears. Not because he cleared his schedule, but because he finally saw them as his priority. He didn't need to say it. The way he cradled Noah's head, the way he kissed Liam's forehead, the way he smiled when they babbled nonsense into his tie. It was enough. At lunchtime, he walked the halls with them, introduced them to people, explained who they were. Some employees clapped, others cried. A few hugged him. Rodrigo, his COO, pulled him aside. I didn't think I'd ever see this side of you again, he said. David just smiled. I didn't think I had it in me. Rodrigo glanced at the boys. They changed you. David nodded. They healed me. On the way home, the car was quiet. The twins were asleep in the back. David was staring at the road with a softness in his expression I hadn't seen before. Rachel? He said quietly. Yes? I used to think power meant control. And now? He smiled faintly. Now I know it means presence. It was late when we got home. The twins were fast asleep in their car seats, blissfully unaware that they'd just melted the hearts of 50 corporate executives and changed their father's legacy forever. David carried them upstairs, 1 in each arm, like he'd done it his whole life. I followed in silence. There was a stillness in the air, not the kind that made the house feel haunted anymore, but the kind that made it feel whole. He tucked them in gently, checked their bottles, and adjusted their blankets with the precision of a man who had finally learned what mattered most. As he stood over their cribs, I watched his face soften, that hardened jaw, the furrowed brow, the haunted eyes, all fading. And then he whispered something I'll never forget. I used to dread this room, he said. Now, it's my favorite place in the world. We walked out together, leaving the nursery door cracked open just enough to hear them breathe. Downstairs, I made tea. He poured bourbon. We sat at the kitchen island, the same one where I'd first handed him a warm bottle and told him to try. Now he knew what he was doing. Today felt like a dream, he said. A beautiful one, I added. He took a sip, then leaned back against the chair, watching me over the rim of the glass. I've talked so much about myself these past weeks, he said. But I don't know anything about you. I looked down at my mug. What do you want to know? Everything. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to tell him, but because I hadn't told anyone in a long time. And then I did. My mom died when I was 10, I began softly. Car accident, hit and run. 1 minute we were listening to the radio. The next I was pulling my little brother out of the wreckage. David's eyes widened, stunned. I was old enough to understand what happened, I continued. But my brother, he was just 2. He never remembered her. And for a long time, I hated him for that. I laughed bitterly. I know it's irrational, but grief doesn't care about logic. David stayed silent. I spent most of my teens being both sister and mother. My dad, he checked out, went to work, came home, sat in the dark. He was breathing, but not alive. I sipped my tea, then looked up at David. I know what it's like to grow up in a house full of ghosts. He nodded slowly. That's why you understood the twins. I recognized the silence, I said. The way their cries weren't just noise. They were echoes of someone missing. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, very quietly, he asked, Did your father ever come back? I swallowed hard. No. He died when I was 21. Car crash. Just like my mom. David winced. I never got to hear I'm proud of you. Or, I'm sorry. He just left. A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. I spent years wondering if he ever looked at me and saw me, or just saw the woman he lost. David leaned forward, elbows on the table. I looked at my sons and only saw Claire. I nodded, biting my lip. It took me a long time to understand that love doesn't erase grief. It just grows beside it. He was quiet, his fingers tracing the edge of his glass. You saved me, he said suddenly. No, I replied. I reminded you who you were before the pain. He looked at me then. Really looked. Not like a man observing an employee, but like a man seeing someone who had quietly carried too much for too long. You deserve peace too, he said. The kitchen went still. There was something fragile between us now. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. 2 people who had been crushed by grief, and were still standing anyway. I should get some sleep, I whispered, pushing back my chair. He nodded but didn't move. Rachel? I turned. Thank you, he said, for seeing what I couldn't. I gave him a soft smile. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Keep seeing them. He nodded. Every day. As I walked to my room, I passed the nursery. Liam stirred in his crib, let out a little sigh, and fell back asleep. I placed a hand over my heart. It was still beating, and for the first time in years, it wasn't just keeping me alive. It was reminding me what life could feel like. He started reading the letters every night. Not out loud. Not at first. Just silently, in the soft yellow glow of the nursery lamp, while the boys fell asleep beside him. I would walk past the door and see him, legs crossed on the rug, back against the crib, a letter in his hands and his lips barely moving as he whispered Claire's words to himself. Sometimes he cried, sometimes he smiled, But every time, he stayed. One evening, a few days after our talk in the kitchen, I found him sitting in the nursery before bedtime. Liam in his lap, Noah chewing on a soft cloth book. He looked up as I stepped in. "Do you want to hear one?" he asked. I nodded. He reached into the little wooden box we had moved to the nursery and pulled out a letter labeled, "To Liam, Year 2. "But he's only 9 months, I said. "I know," David smiled. "But I needed this one tonight." He opened it gently, like it was something sacred. His voice trembled on the first few words, but then it steadied. "Hi, my sweet Liam. If you're reading this, you're probably running around the house by now, trying to eat bugs or crayons or the cat. But tonight, I need to tell you something important. You are not just a second twin. You are not the other one. You are a light all your own. You have your father's stubbornness, which means you'll argue about bedtime and probably fall asleep in the hallway on purpose. But you also have his heart. And when that heart finally opens, it will move mountains for you. Let it. Let him love you the way I know he can. And if he ever forgets how, read this to him. Tell him I said it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to feel broken. But it's never okay to give up on you. I love you, little fighter. Now go find your brother and hug him. He needs it too. Forever, Mom." The room went quiet. Liam had fallen asleep on his chest. Noah crawled across the rug and rested his head on David's knee, curling up like a sleepy puppy. David looked at me. "I used to avoid this room like it was poisoned." "I remember," I whispered. "But now, I feel like she's here." "She is," I said. "Every word she wrote still breathes." He glanced at the envelope in his hands. "She wrote these knowing she might not be here to read them. That's what makes them even more powerful." He looked at me then, really looked. "I want to do the same." "Write letters?" "Yes, for them, from me. I want them to know everything I didn't say this year." I smiled. "Then start tonight." After the babies were asleep, we sat together in the quiet of the kitchen. He opened his laptop, not to check emails, not for spreadsheets, but for something new. He titled the document, "For Liam and Noah, from Dad." The screen blinked. The cursor waited. And then, with trembling hands, he began to type. "Boys, I'm sorry it took me so long to hold you. You were born on the hardest day of my life, and for a long time, I didn't see your faces. I saw hers. But now I see you. I see your little smiles, your curious eyes, your tiny hands that reach for me like I'm the safest place on earth. I don't know how to be the perfect father, but I know how to try. And I promise, from now on, I'll try every single day. You are not a reminder of what I lost. You are the reason I found myself again. Love, Dad." He finished typing, then leaned back, breathing hard. "Does it sound stupid?" he asked. "No," I said. "It sounds like forgiveness." He looked down at the screen again, and then, softly, "Maybe that's what they need, and what I need too." Over the next few nights, he wrote more. 1 letter became 2. 2 became 5. He started printing them, dating them, and placing them next to Claire's. Not to compete with her, but to stand beside her. A mother's memory. A father's promise. I think that's when I realized this wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about building something new. Not from the ruins, but from the roots. The house felt different now. It wasn't just the absence of crying, though that was still miraculous in itself. It was everything else. The way sunlight seemed to pour through the windows instead of just landing there. The way laughter began to echo up the staircase, sometimes from the babies, sometimes from David, sometimes from me. The ghosts hadn't left, but they had learned to share the space with the living. A full month had passed since that first night David held the twins, and in that time, he became someone new. Not perfect, not healed, but present. He changed diapers without flinching. He sang lullabies, badly, with pride. He even began taking turns with me waking up in the middle of the night. Sometimes I'd reach the nursery and find him already there, rocking Noah with one arm while holding a warm bottle in the other. He was learning to live again. And the boys? They knew it. They were blooming, smiling more, crying less, sleeping longer. They had learned their father's face, and they trusted it now. It was a Friday morning, early spring. The air smelled like new leaves and fresh paint, because David had finally agreed to repaint Claire's room and turn it into something new. A memory room, filled with photos and letters, not sealed away behind grief. Mrs. Ellison was watering plants on the porch. The boys were in the living room on a soft quilted mat, playing with wooden blocks. David was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, and I was sitting with them, laughing at Liam, who kept trying to stack his blocks like a skyscraper and knocking them over every time. "Careful, buddy," I smiled. "You're not in construction yet." Liam babbled something unintelligible. And then, it happened. Noah looked up from his rattle, eyes wide and glassy, and reached his arms toward the kitchen. Then he opened his tiny mouth and said in a soft, breathy tone, "Dada." Time stopped. I blinked. David turned around from the kitchen like he'd been struck by lightning. Noah said it again, this time clearer. "Dada." Liam followed, not to be outdone, clapped his little hands and repeated the word like it was a chant. "Dada, Dada." David didn't move, just stared at them, and then, slowly, like every muscle in his body was waking up at once, he walked over, knelt, and held them both. No tears, no words, just a silence filled with awe, because they weren't just calling for him. They were claiming him. Later that day, he pulled me aside. "I thought the first time they said it, I'd cry," he said. "But I didn't cry. I just felt like the world made sense again." I smiled. "They've known who you are for a while," I said. "They were just waiting for you to believe it too." That night, after the boys fell asleep and the house was quiet again, David and I sat out on the back porch under the stars. The breeze was soft, the crickets loud. He handed me a mug of tea. "I don't know what happens next," he said. "You mean with them?" "I mean with us." He looked down, then up at me again, eyes steady. "You walked into this house a stranger. You became their anchor, and mine." My chest tightened. "I was just trying to help." "You did more than help," he said. "You gave us back to each other." I swallowed. "You think you're ready? For the rest of it?" He nodded slowly. "I'm not afraid of love anymore," he said, "and I don't want you to leave." Silence. The kind that says everything. I didn't answer right away, but I reached for his hand. And this time, he didn't pull away. Sometimes healing doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't burst through the door or shout your name. Sometimes, it whispers. In a baby's first word. In a father's first smile. In the way a once silent house begins to breathe again. I came here for a job. Temporary. Simple. That's what I told myself. But the truth is, I came here because I knew what silence sounded like. I knew what it meant to feel invisible in your own home. To be a child watching an adult drown in their own pain. To grow up thinking love was something you had to earn instead of something you deserved just for being alive. What I didn't expect was to watch someone else climb out of that same dark place, step by step, with two tiny hands pulling him forward. David didn't just become a father. He chose to, over and over. Every morning when he got up first to change a diaper. Every night when he opened another letter from Claire and let her words stitch the broken parts of him back together. Every time he said, "I love you," to boys too young to repeat it back. But who felt it anyway? And me? I didn't save this family. They saved me. They reminded me that grief doesn't mean something is over. Sometimes, it's just the beginning of a different kind of love. Liam and Noah are walking now. Wobbling, really. Tiny steps that crash into walls, furniture, knees. But David catches them every time. Every single time. And sometimes I wonder, who's really learning to walk? The babies, or all of us? We don't talk about Claire every day, but she's everywhere. In the laughter. In the stories David tells at bedtime. In the lullaby we all learn to sing, even off key. She left pieces of herself in those boys. And somehow I think she knew that we'd find each other in the space between heartbreak and healing. So if you're still listening, if this story reached you somehow, maybe you're carrying your own silence, your own loss, your own room that's been locked for too long. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you'll never feel whole again. If so, let me tell you something I had to learn the hard way. You don't have to fix everything. You just have to stay. Stay with the people who are trying. Stay with the parts of yourself that still believe in love. And one day, maybe quietly, maybe all at once, you'll realize you're no longer just surviving, you're home. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more real, emotional journeys. Click the like button to help it reach others who need it, and tell us in the comments below, where are you watching from? And who's someone in your life you've learned to love again? I'll be there, reading every single story you share. Thank you for listening. This is Rachel Morgan, and this was the story of how one family stopped crying and started living again.